Hey guys, how's it going? Matt for Foulball Productions here. Thank you so much for joining me today. I hope that you're doing well because I'm doing great. Doing so good. Just just wonderful. Can't say phenomenal because man, am I frustrated with the technical behind the scenes of this live stream. I guess I don't know. My microphone was giving me all types of issues. At one point I didn't think I'd even be able to do today's stream, so thankfully, I got that sorted out. I hope it sounds good. There's a million different factors, and I did new drivers, and this stupid platform that I decided to pay for. Why, I'll never know. I thought it was a good platform. It's nothing but a pain in the ass. If you're a live streamer, I do not recommend using Riverside.fm for any kind of live streaming. It's a great software to record interviews. If you want to record an interview, it's brilliant. It's unbelievably high quality. But if you want to live stream, do not do it. Do not. Oh my God. Okay. Well, here we go. I'm here. This is the 104th episode of the MFer podcast. I thank you very much for joining me today, spending time with me on this beautiful Tuesday evening. I got some stuff I want to talk about. There was not a lot going on in the news recently, other than just the ongoing Epstein scandals and the failure of the Trump administration to deliver on that. But we talked all about that on Thursday. And besides that, I don't really have much else to add. I guess you could continue to publicly, verbally flog Pam Bondi for the terrible job that she's been doing and the Trump administration's cover-up. I don't really know what else you could use to describe what's going on. It's a cover-up. There were 3 million files that were supposed to be there, and they're just not showing up. So, but there's just really not much more to add to that. So I want to talk about something else. In fact, I kind of wanted to talk about what I started talking about on YouTube here, which was media critique was how I started doing YouTube. I started doing YouTube. I was an actor. I was living in LA during the pandemic, and I wanted to talk about movies, TV, things that I love, which, is still a medium of things that I love. But we've had a dark age. Things have been pretty bad in the world of like content, television, film for a long time. And I didn't really feel any need to talk about that type of stuff for a long time because it just seemed like, yeah, everything sucks, especially nerdy shit. And I don't know. I didn't feel like I needed to be another voice saying the same thing. I feel like there's a bunch of accounts out there that cover it and cover it really well. Mauler does a great job. Critical Drinker does a great job. Nerdrotic does a great job. These guys do it. I mean, do you need another guy being, hey, you know what sucks? Marvel, Disney. You know what I mean? I just felt like it wasn't necessary. So I sort of shifted into more cultural conversations and then now politics. I pretty much exclusively do politics. But recently, politics and culture have really intersected. They've really become a topic of conversation. And, there was a big to-do, I guess it was last week after the Super Bowl with the TP USA All-American halftime show. Which, I don't know if you watched the whole thing. Maybe you did. Maybe you're the target audience of the TP USA Super Bowl halftime show. For myself, it was a little tricky. It was a little rough. I wasn't able to make it through much of it. It was pretty cringy. It was pretty brutal, to be completely honest. And so I watched clips. I've seen stuff like that. But it started this conversation about sort of the right wing in the United States in its position in media. And I think it's a worthy conversation to have. I really do. And I wanted to jump in on it. I have a video that I'll be playing a little bit later from a creator that was on the show just last week, the Right Wing Coalition. He put out a video just on this very subject. And it was stimulating. And I was like, this would be an interesting topic to talk about. And then what happened was HBO decided to make good things again. Decided to make content that was worth watching. Which, you could not have dragged me into the audience of a Game of Thrones anything without being violently coerced. I would not have voluntarily gone to see anything Game of Thrones. I think I watched the first season of House of the Dragon and didn't find it particularly compelling. It was okay. It wasn't as woke and terrible as I was expecting, but it also wasn't compelling. And I think, for all you culture warriors out there, like, me, my friends, this side of YouTube, not being woke kind of became the bar for a long time. That kind of became like the default. Oh, this isn't woke? Okay, that's something. But that's a pretty low bar. That's a pretty low bar to enter the conversation when it comes to media. And I don't know about you guys, but I don't really watch much. I don't really put on many things. One Piece I thought was really excellent. Mobland on Paramount was pretty good. I think the Penguin was really strong and ended terribly despite the fact that it has near universal praise. I think they pulled an okey doke on people and they don't recognize it. I thought it was some pretty manipulative storytelling to just be like, he was evil the whole time. And it's like, was he? I mean, you didn't really establish that all that well. I mean, you showed me who he was, and then you're like, no, but even back then he was bad. It's like, okay, but you didn't show me that character. You showed me a totally different character and then retconned it by the end of the first season. And you're like, a villain. I was like, I don't know. Everybody was jizzing all over it, and I didn't really feel the need to jump in and dissuade them because I don't really talk about media that much. But the point is, content's been shit. Movies, I don't watch new movies. I don't watch new TV. It's bad. But you know what I kept hearing all about was this show on HBO, A Night of the Seven Kingdoms. I saw it from the right wing or the nerdy YouTubers that I watch, and then just sort of a general consensus that this Night of the Seven Kingdoms show was great. And I was like, okay. So I was hanging out over the weekend, and I decided I was like, oh yeah, you know what? There's that show. I'd like to give it a try. I'm curious. I'm interested to see what this show is going to be. So I popped it on, and the funny thing is, a lot of people said that it was the first episode wasn't very good, but it gets really good in the second episode. I thought it was brilliant out the gate. I thought it was like really captivating, very simple and deliberate storytelling, not trying to do anything fancy, not trying to obscure the plot by some really, high level intellectual planet brain storytelling. No, it was just telling you the story. Is presenting this guy Dunk, this hedge knight. It's a term you don't get to know until a little bit later into the show, but basically it just means a knight without a house, a knight without a lord. He's just kind of a broke-ass knight. He's a fucking broke-ass knight. He's got no money, no bitches, no hoes, and no stacks. And, he's like a poor kid, like going, trying to find his way in the world. Maybe he wants to go, there's this tournament, and he thinks he's going to go do it. He doesn't even know what the hell that means, but he's going to go fight because he's big, and he thinks he knows how to fight. And that's kind of the whole story. It's at least the thrust of the plot, right? If you say, what's it about? And, obviously it gets richer and more complex, but that is the basis of the story. If you watch Game of Thrones, which I did, I watched every single episode, and I used to watch the hell out of that show. I used to watch every season over and over. I mean, when a new season would come out, I would go back to season one and then rewatch all the episodes up until the new season. I was obsessed. I was a very big fan of Game of Thrones. But that obviously, shit the bed. But that show had like so many layers, so much complexity going on in that show. There was, all the different houses and the plotting and the scheme and the White Walkers and, Khaleesi and dragons. And there's just so much going on. And not to say that it was bad. I liked it. I really did until they blew it. But I thought it was a fantastic show. This show it could not be more scaled down. I mean, you pretty much see... I'm trying to think. I think you see the entire show purely from Dunk's perspective. That's the protagonist, this guy Dunk. He's an Irish lad from Ireland. But he's actually, in real life, he's a former professional rugby player, which is pretty cool. But you see pretty much the entire show from this guy's perspective, and it's really enjoyable. And it made me think, right? It's like, wow. They can indeed still make great shows. And it is great. I've watched every episode. I binged the hell out of it that night, and I wanted more. The episodes are a tad short. Most of them none of them are an hour. Most of them are about a half hour, which is, in my opinion, that's a pretty short thing. But it's fantastic. But it made me think, because what started happening is on Twitter, especially, there happened to be a lot of people, a lot of, say, right-wing adjacent, right-wing commentators, people in that sphere who started claiming it. Like, this is what white culture is. This is white excellence, whatever, blah, blah, blah. And, it is interesting. It was an interesting kind of, like, phenomenon, if you will, because if you've been paying attention, if you haven't been living in a locked room, in a padded cell on some island somewhere, you've noticed that the right wing of this country and Hollywood have been completely at odds with one another, right? Completely, in all ways, in every way, at odds with one another. And it's odd, right? You see them, they're a Hollywood show comes out and all these right wing guys are like, that's our shit. That's based. And it isn't really. Not to say that you can't own the show for your own personal reasons, but that came out of Hollywood. That came out of that communist, degenerate cesspool that is Hollywood. And I used to live there. I can say that as an authority. It is indeed a communist, degenerate cesspool who basically have made it their mission to make nothing good, or very, very few things good in a long time. And so it's an interesting thing that's happening, where these guys are like, yeah, that's us, that's our culture. Yet they still would, gladly deny California the vote of any influence in our federal government. And I would agree with them. But why I thought it was particularly interesting is because, while, they're watching this show, they're claiming this show, they hate Hollywood. The show is great. The show is white culture now. But the right doesn't really create art like that all. Like, when it comes to how's it going, boys, by the way? All the Angels 1429. Hello. The most recent episode was fantastic. I agree with you. And so did Lord of the Rings. Where's the cutoff, you figure? I'm not entirely sure what you mean. Cutoff on what, to be precise. But the right doesn't really make art. Now, that's not to say that right-wing people can't and don't. But when it comes to sort of a collective, they really don't. And this couldn't not have been more exemplified better than the TPUSA halftime show. I mean, that was just a disgrace. And it's an interesting phenomenon. Like, because what happens is when... Now, okay, I want to take back what I just said. It's not that the right doesn't create art. Razorfist is a YouTuber. He created a comic book that's been very well received. Eric July, you could say he's probably a culturally right, economically pure libertarian, but, kind of on the right, if you will, about a lot of different things. He made a comic book. I know that Critical Drinker, he's probably a little more socially right-wing than your average person. Mauler, I think, kind of falls in some of that camp a little bit. They're made things. So it's not to say that independent creators or people on the right don't make things. That's not what I mean. But what kind of constitutes American right-wing media or right-wing content, right-wing movies and stuff, it's actually kind of interesting because it's so obliquely political that it's kind of what they claim they don't like, right? Like if you make something like what was the Lady Ballers, like the Daily Wire comedy, and it was just all fucking trans jokes, right? Like, which is like, this not to say that there's nothing to be funny there. There's plenty to be funny there. But it's not like art, right? Like the whole thing is like, you libs. And when Hollywood would make stuff like that, when Hollywood would make things that are like, obliquely political, or even subtly where they undercut, male archetypes, or they race swap, or they gender swap and stuff like that. Like, why did we hate that? Is it because we hate black people? I mean, probably some of us, yes, but realistically, no, right? Is it because we hate women? It's like, on certain days, of course, we all hate women sometimes. But do we reject them outright in our media? No. No, why is Terminator such a popular movie? Why is Alien such a popular movie? Why are these things that were just like, please go back to giving us a badass female heroine, like when you did it right? We're not really sexist or racist in our content. What was the problem? Well, the problem is that it was overtly political, that there was an agenda underneath it, that the point of making the art was not to tell an interesting story, was not to make a good song, was not to create an entertaining moment for you. The point was to give you your medicine, to make you understand, just so you know what you're supposed to think, what opinions you're supposed to have, right? You fucking alt-right, white supremacist Nazi, and we were just like, ugh. We hated it. Why, I ask you then, when you go out and you go to create something, right? You know, when you're going to like, okay, Hollywood's gone nuts. They've gone woke. It's also progressive. We can't stomach their content. It's undermining our culture. We hate it. Well, then how come your response is to just be overtly political in the other direction? Why would that be entertaining to someone? Like, the thing is, like, you don't need to do that, right? If you're going to create like a counter to something, if you're going to create art that is not controlled in sort of a woke globe, right? If you're just going to create its own thing, that purely that act is the act of rebellion. You don't need to right-wing code it. You don't need to underscore your values as a Christian, whatever. You don't have to do that. Like, that will come out in your expression. If that's who you are as a creator, just telling the story, your virtues and your values will come out. You know, whatever it is, whether it's music or movies. I'm using movies as the example because that is something that the right has failed to do dramatically. And there's lots of reasons for that. But it's just something that I feel like every time they try, it's just so overtly political. It's like, now I just feel like I'm taking my medicine from the right wing. I'm getting the same thing. I'm just getting another lecture. It's just it's from a different side of the aisle. And that stinks too. What's up, Papa Cotton? How you doing, buddy? Good to see you, man. Cheers, brother. Both sides are soulless and vile. Let them fight. I don't give a fuck. Well, that's not true. Right? Because I consider myself right-wing, but I'm not TPUSA right-wing. I'm not Daily Wire Ben Shapiro right-wing, but I have these virtues. I have these values. And also, I used to live in LA, right? I'm like a faggy artist kid. You know what I mean? Like, I used to be in that world. I used to perform. Nothing gayer than that. When they're just doing themselves, like, there's like a natural affinity to art from like the lefties and the liberals, right? Like they tend to gravitate towards those worlds more. They tend to be pretty good at it, but they've all just cooked their brains so much, or they've selected so aggressively for obedience and hive mind mentality that anyone who might even be interesting or challenge that is just kicked out, and you're left with this sort of this core of just the most aggressive activists, race, gender, communists. Like, we've all lived through this. There's no reason to even, you've seen the destruction of every IP. So what I guess the point is just that, like, you're doing the action, you're creating the thing. There's literally no reason to make it overtly political, because what does that really do? Like, all you're doing is the same thing that you claimed you hated, and now you're just alienating anyone who might be neutral or interested. I'll give you a good example. There's a few, actually. So the Daily Wire right now has a show out called, what is that called? It's like King Arthur, the Pendragon something. Pendragon Coach Pump to something. Let me see. Hold on. So I was watching it the other. The Pendragon Cycle, The Rise of Merlin. It's a Daily Wire show. Now, credit where credit's due. The show looks pretty damn good. The cinematography and the shooting of it is very capable. It doesn't look cheap. It doesn't look slapped together, But, and I think I watched about 20 minutes of the first episode. It was, it was kind of boring. It wasn't terrible. It just was not wildly interesting because it's a Daily Wire show. You're left with people who are willing to risk their entire career on working with the Daily Wire. Now that's not fair. That's wrong, but it is the reality. So when I turned it on, it's like the first thing you see is like a little sizzle reel of all Daily Wire content. And it's like Matt Walsh and Ben Shapiro and, who's that other guy? Michael Knowles and the Daily Wire, And like, I don't even want that. Like I'm pretty far right wing. But I don't want that when I'm going to turn on some entertainment. Like, I don't want to be reminded of that. Like, just imagine you turned on Netflix and it was like Hassan, AOC, Ilhan Omar, Netflix. You'd just be like, ugh. Like, gross. Like, I'm so turned off now. And now I feel like everything that follows this is going to be like left-wing commie-coded bullshit, right? Like, that would be my assumption. That's what would make sense to me. So when you put on something on the Daily Wire, that's what I like. And especially if you're like even mildly sensitive to that, you're turning it off, right? If you're like a lib, you're like, nah, fascists. They turn it off. And if you're like neutral but like aware of it, you're probably like rolling your eye. You literally have to just be a cheerleader for that company, not even that side. Because like I said, I'm kind of adjacent to that side. But I don't want to see that. So you literally have to be like a Daily Wire, like ultra fan to be pumped when you see the Daily Wire cross with all the Daily Wire content. I mean, you're just shaving off so much of your potential audience that because you're forcing them to come deal with, your politics, your worldview, your cronies. And it's like, that's gay, man. Like, I don't want to be a part of that. I don't want any modern day politics in my entertainment. I really don't. And so it makes me think of Shane Gillis. Now, he's a comedian. If you're unfamiliar, I guess you don't like stand-up comedy because he's probably the biggest, most popular stand-up comedian in the world. Does stadiums. Great. Very funny. I love him. I think he's just been getting better. He's got a great podcast, Matt and Shade's Secret Podcast. Anyway, he did a show. He used to do all these sketches on this YouTube channel called Gilly and Keeves. Gilly, Shane Gillis, and Keeves, Matt Keever. What's his real? I forget. John McKeever, and they call him Keeves. So Gilly and Keeves, and they make sketches, right? A bunch of sketches, very, very incredibly successful sketches, millions and millions of views on YouTube. And they made a show called Tires. And Tires is on Netflix. It's 2 seasons. And it's basically just about this tire shop in like central PA where Shane is from. And he's kind of playing like a shittier, dumber version of himself. Now, Shane probably is like a centrist liberal. He has some right-wing sensibilities, but most likely as a guy, he's probably, if you had to pin him down on all the issues, he's probably like a centrist liberal. He's comfortable making right-wing jokes. He's comfortable making, race-related jokes, but, honestly, most likely he's probably a centrist liberal. But he had as much of an axe to grind with this political culture war as anybody, because Shane Gillis was hired to be on SNL, and then the socialist bots went through all of his podcasts and they found one time he made like an Asian voice and some Asian jokes, and they fired him from SNL. Now, it was probably the best thing that could have happened to him because it launched him into like greater heights than he, probably would have achieved without that, because it made him infamous, and it was right at the time of cancel culture being super hot. But it was, it was a big deal, right? So from his perspective, he has an axe to grind with these socialist, commie, left-wing, cancel culture, anti-fascist twerps, right? But that's not the angle he takes, A, in his comedy, or B, like in Tires. Tires is just funny. Papa Cotton agrees. Tires is hilarious. It is. It's just a funny show. It's not like... It's not Netflix sensibility. It's not Hollywood sensibility. Like, they'd probably think it's transphobic, racist. I'm sure they'd find a million reasons why it doesn't qualify their checklist of acceptable entertainment. But it's also not like, yeah, stupid libs. Like, there's little jokes like that here and there, but it's not about that. right? The whole purpose of that show is not there to give you your medicine from the right wing and give you like a little lecture about why the libs are stupid and AOC's a dumb bitch. Like, it's not that. It's just a funny show. And it's telling a good story in their style of humor. And that is what, if you want to create right-wing media, you want to create a counterculture to all the lib oppression, just make the thing. Just create the culture. You've already won you're right on the argument. We all agree. My mom watches content and she's a boomer lib. She watches things and is just like, ugh, all the gay stuff is just too much. Why has everyone got to be gay? Why are they always race swapping? Why is it always this? You know, it's like, she doesn't like it. You know, I have friends who are normies. They notice. They don't like it. You know, I'm much more sensitive to that, and I'm much more outspoken about it. But a lot of people just aren't. But everybody notices. Everybody's over it. So you've already won the argument. You don't need to underscore the fact that your position is correct, right? You don't need to reinforce it. Make the thing. Just make the thing. And, you know, credit to the Daily Wire. They did do that with the Arthur show. Or Merlin show or whatever. But I mean, like I said, the problem there is that you have to go to the Daily Wire and you got to see fucking Matt Walsh's stupid face. Matt Walsh. You got to see his stupid face when you go and like start the streaming program. And it still feels like a political action. When I'm watching Tires, it does not feel like a political action. Granted, it's on Netflix. Okay, fine. Maybe you could argue supporting that platform is a political action. I think it's a pretty weak argument. But I think there's a much stronger argument to be, and it's not even support, but just being on the Daily Wire is a political action. It's a explicitly like right-wing, traditional, conservative platform, and it's fucking gay, dude. You know, do I have to click when I agree to terms and services? Do I have to agree to drink liberal tears? You know what I mean? Like, it's corny, bro. And then it's just as corny as the other thing. So you've just created like a little silo, a little individual, a little safe space for conservatives, for normie conservatives, and it's fucking boring as hell. It's boring. What's up, Central Dildo? How you doing, brother? Good to see you, man. And I just think that that's really important. Like, that's important to recognize that, like, you don't have to make things. If you're going to create art, just create art, right? Like the TPUSA All-American Halftime Show, that's gay, bro. That's fucking lame as hell. Like, just put on the show. Don't make it about owning the libs. Like, find good artists. They don't have to have your politics down the line, because when you have these what's that word? Like purity tests, it's fucking dull. That's why Hollywood stinks, because everyone has to have the most pure commie opinions. And it's like, you're just doing the same shit. You're just doing the right-wing version of it. And brother, that's gay as fuck. That's fucking lame. What's up, Sensitive? Am I talking about slopulism? A little bit. Yeah, a little bit. Because the show, A Night of the Seven Kingdoms, is on HBO, and it's from the slop factory of Hollywood. But it's utterly fantastic. It's like they remembered that they can make great things again, which is fascinating. It's like a really interesting, like, oh, wow, who knew they could still do it, you know? I mean, I guess we all kind of did. But then you see all these guys on the right, on Twitter and on the internet, who are like, yeah, this is ours. This is like white culture. And it's like, bro, you know, own it all you want, but it came from the commie pit of hell, Hollywood. So it's not like you can own it and like that's ours, and that's cool. And I think that that's great. Like I like the show. I love the show. I'm going to continue to watch it until, you know, it probably inevitably gets gay. But you know, the right doesn't really, when we make things, it sucks. You know, it's like when you're making explicitly political music or movies, it's fucking gay. It's lame. And I just, that's the I don't know, that's just my point. So we're going to watch the video from the Right-Wing Coalition on this very subject. I thought he did a really good job summing it up and kind of making the point. What's up, Davina? You don't fix political propaganda with more propaganda. Fucking A. That's exactly what it is. That's exactly what it is. Yeah. All the angels. I think that's why I like the Right-Wing Coalition so much, because he is making art from video essays to the book he's getting published. Yeah. Yeah. Well, and it's like, his is expressly political, but it's a little different. Like, he's telling the story about real life. It's not like, you know, It's not like if he wrote a book, if he wrote like a novel, it wouldn't be like, hey, the most base, trad Christian man in the world who never cheated on his wife went and slayed the dragon who's got a hook nose and penny clippings. You know what I mean? Like, it would just be like, okay. You know, like, that's not really the point of story. Like, virtue is higher than politics, right? Politics is fleeting. Politics morphs. Politics is a daily cycle, a monthly, yearly cycle. But, like, virtues are permanent. Virtues are timeless. So that's what you should be like. You should be ascending. You should really be like almost scrutinizing your own point of view and your own worldview when you create something artistic, when you create a story, when you create a movie, when you create music. It shouldn't be so blunt, like my politics. That's what we hated when Hollywood did. Why the fuck would we like it when the right does it? Our culture was written by a postmodernist. Our culture. Do you mean our current culture, like our actual culture, was written by a postmodernist male feminist? Are you talking about? Are you talking about the show, the current show, Ira, something like that? Oh, George R.R. Martin. Okay, yeah, I got it. Yeah. Well, that was everybody, right? That was just like the default position was you're just shades of liberal. You know, maybe you're the redder shade or the bluer shade, but we're all kind of liberals. Politics is fake and gay. Word. All right, so let's watch. I want to watch Right Wing Coalition's video. I hope it doesn't copyright claim me. But this is fair use. This is fair use. WRWC. Okay, so yeah, George R. R. Martin. Yeah. Absolutely, I know. Look, and I don't know if you've seen the show, but it honestly is great because you know what it isn't. It's not political. There's some unique casting in like some of the backdrop. You're like, oh, there's a lot of Asians here in medieval England. I mean, it's obviously not medieval England, but you're like, it's interesting. But the show is just very good. The show is just like because it's not trying to do anything other than tell a good show. All right, let's watch Mr. Coalition's video. Like I said, sir, this is fair use. I'm just commenting on it.
The recent Turning Point USA halftime show has gotten me thinking quite a bit about the far right's position in the culture. As of now, we really do stand alone as the only sincerely dangerous force that is totally opposed to the current status quo. Everything else hopes to coalesce underneath or beside it. Whether it's the conservatives who really have liberal principles or Antifa who's looking to expedite the journey.
Sencha Dildo, you're in luck because there's only 7 episodes and the last one is Sunday. So you can binge the whole thing. And they're pretty short episodes, too. I mean, I think it all told, it's like 2.5 hours of content, maybe 3. It's kind of like, it's like a movie, which I was like, I wish there was a little bit more. Like, that's pretty brief. It's great, though. Like, there's really no wasted time. It moves at its own pace, but it's not slow. It's very good. All the nerds are right. It's fantastic.
Everybody outside of the corporate hegemony is looking to make simple modifications to it, whereas we are looking for total upheaval. And the ones who are upholding the status quo know this. There's a reason that any allusions to white identitarianism and the masculine order have been so unequivocally rejected by every existing institution. The application of either of these societal operating procedures would instantly destroy everything the liberal order stands for. Given the distinct diametric opposition here, the current hegemonic forces will continue to do all they can to reject what we stand for on the far right. If we are ultimately victorious, then that would presume a legitimate revolution.
Well, the one thing I noticed, Sentient Dildo, is that the Dunk and Egg story, it's like there's actually like a hero's journey in it that's focusing on Dunk. It's a traditional story. He's like down on his luck or he's like a very low status and then he's got to go through all the challenges to make a hero. I think that's the thing that like, you know, was lost in Game of Thrones. It was like he was trying so hard to postmodernize everything, to subvert expectations and do the shocking moments to the point where, okay, like, but now there's nothing. Now there's no heroes. Now there's no, like, what's the story? Like, Bran takes the throne? What the fuck are you talking about? Why didn't he warg into a dragon? Like, why did Jaime Lannister not finish his redemption arc? Like, what are you doing? They're just fucking around. And it's because it's like you destroyed all the pillars of storytelling, and what are you left with? You're left, like, cornered into your own writing decisions. And since you put them out, like, as series, as novels, and I don't know if you had a plan. If you did, it's not very clear to me. It's like, yeah, you wrote yourself into a corner and now you're stuck. And it's like, you think you're so clever by destroying all these tropes. But what you've done is destroy the story, your own story, which was incredibly layered and good. What is up? E. Clay. How you doing, buddy? Good to see you, sir. Zax, what's cracking, buddy? What is cracking? Howdy, folks.
Would have taken place, even if it's done peacefully. A revolution must happen for us to win. However, if we are to successfully displace the standing hegemony, it will require a substantial amount of cultural energy. Only once we can wield enough cultural power to organize and direct the youth will we have enough fuel to propel us past the liberal order and replace it with our own order. To do this,
I think that's such a precise point he just made there about having to, like, it's basically having cultural capital that goes beyond, like, winning a political argument, right? It's having more. It's having, like, a cultural infrastructure, if you will. You know, it's like that was, I think, what had a big deal with the Joe Rogan having Trump on, because Rogan has so much social capital. Because he's been podcasting for so long. He's an open-minded guy. You know, he picks up the sword when he has to, but that's not his point. He's not that guy, right? And for a while there, Rogan was like Johnny Carson. Like, if you went on Rogan, it basically made your career. Probably still has a significant impact. But back then, you know, maybe 6-7 years ago, it was like the show to go on. You know, it launched a lot of people's careers, for better or for worse. We're not going to get into, you know, that, because I find all that hair splitting about who's funny and who isn't just pedantic and boring. If you don't like him, don't watch him. I don't know why anyone has to fucking, oh, no, I want everyone to know I don't think he's funny. It's like, who gives a shit? But when Trump goes on Rogan and Rogan kind of endorses him, that has social cachet because there's an institution there. There's like a history there. Right. And I think it's like it has to go beyond simply like popular support for a candidate. It has to have something bigger behind it. Right. And it's like not to take it the wrong way, not to make like the Daily Wire TV show and be like, hey, we're on the right. We're on the right of things, man. And you know how you guys are on the right? Well, so are we. And we made lady ballers and boop-a-doop. It's just like, boy, ugh. It's important to actually capture culture, to actually capture something worth sharing with other people for the sake of sharing it with other people, not just to win the argument against the libs. I think that's a good point you make there.
We will need to harness the revolutionary spirit. This war will not be won through obstinate virtue signaling or contrarianism. Dedicatedly being the villain isn't a good enough position. Edginess won't win alone. If we have any hope here, we need to look to the past and take lessons from what has been historically successful. Before we're able to have any substantive, actionable momentum, we have to capture the youth culture. Every genuine power structure has understood this same fact. And the best thing in recent times, which can help us understand what we'll need in order to displace the current orthodoxy, is the 1960s cultural revolution. While the hippie
Vanguardism? What is that? What is vanguardism? Vanguardism is a political strategy central to Leninist theory, where a disciplined, highly conscious party leads the working class to overthrow capitalism and establish socialism. It involves a centralized authority directing revolutionary moments to gain state power. It organized with Vladimir Lenin and the Bolsheviks, emphasizing elite strategic leadership over spontaneous mass action. What is vanguardism? This, what we're talking about, creating a culture that people would desire? I mean, the problem too, though, with like the right wing, that's always going to be tricky when it comes to culture, is that, like, you know, being an good boy is kind of boring. It's not sexy. It's the virtuous way to walk through the world, but it's like, you know, getting married and having kids and, you know, living a stable life and going to church is like not, it's really not, it doesn't have a lot of sex appeal to it. You know what I mean? It's just kind of like, especially when you're young and you're like hungry for, you know, new experiences when it comes to like movies or video games or heroes, you know, the steadfast, hardworking, love your family kind of guy is a little, it doesn't have a lot of sex appeal. So it's kind of, it's a tricky thing to walk, but I don't know. It's like, I guess it kind of comes down to if you're going to ascribe these sort of political virtues to content, right? Like is Lord of the Rings explicitly like a right-wing work? You know, it's traditionalist, that's for sure, which is a pretty common right-wing virtue. But it, you know, it gets tricky because I think when you start thinking in these terms, it's like then it just starts to get boring and gay. Right? Like Lord of the Rings is such an amazing thing. It's like it doesn't really matter what your politics are. The human virtue, the human struggle that's in there. I mean, they're hobbits, but you know, obviously there are no hobbits. Is so relatable and enjoyable and virtuous and for its own right. So I don't know. It gets tricky. It's like that's why I think it's like you just need to make the thing for the sake of making the thing. I don't know. Let's hear a little bit more of this video. Online news organizations probably don't make the best films. Yeah, I think that's fair. You know, disgruntled former actors make shit content. Just remove the commie stuff from it. All right. Goy slop must taste good to work. Yes, I heard it was what was it? The bread is poison and the circus is gay. And I was like, yeah, that's funny. Face.
The movement of the 1960s was expressly left-wing. It was counter to the standing order at the time. It also effectively displaced that standing order and facilitated basically all of the cultural shifts we've been born and raised under. And though there's an endless amount of theories which purport to explain what the true catalyst was for the 60s cultural revolution, it doesn't really matter. Whatever was operating behind the scenes is sort of irrelevant. We know that it worked in the end, and we can all see how that happened. So regardless of whatever the underlying causes for the revolution were, the lesson we should look to take away is how it managed to capture the youth, because that is our first step to victory. The music scene of the 60s was the most broad.
Oh, you know, Senshin Dildo, this just made me think. I started reading that book, The Populist Illusion. Great book, by the way. I was not sure how I was going to feel about it because, you know, when I first read the description, it was like after Trump's victory in 2016, I was like, oh my God, is this going to be a critical theory conversation? But it's not. It's actually just a kind of naked analysis of power. And in that book, he talks about the Cultural Revolution, and he basically talks about the fact that, like, even though like the hippie revolution seems like it was a populist kind of thing, it was a group sort of thing, it was actually like it's a controlled kind of top-down thing that the elites or some degree of elite or some degree of powerful people wanted to make sure happened. So it's interesting as a right-wing coalition is saying this thing about elite theory. Yeah. I mean, as he's saying this though, like as he's talking about this sort of counterculture thing is like, that's what it was. It's like, yeah, that's how it was executed. And that's what was sexy about it. But according to, what's it, Navina? Is that his name? If we were to do something like that, it would still have to be sanctioned, you know, from the elite, from like the group of like elites that come from the top. Here we go. Oh boy. Oh man. We mentioned counterculture. We mentioned elite communism, and here he comes. Here he comes. Just kidding. Final glance. The 60s promo revolution was majorly bought in by the CIA and MI6, totally scrambled the brains of the so-called right and left in the West. Yeah, that's kind of what that's what made me think of that when he starts talking about the Cultural Revolution of the 60s and what the impact that was. And it's like, I don't know if it was really It wasn't really as populist as it seems, or it wasn't really as like, oh, hey, we changed the government. It's like, think the government changed, and you think you changed the government.
The impactful element which resulted in such dramatic change. And the figures in the 60s music scene were all of great influence and stature. Whether it was John Lennon, Jim Morrison, or Mick Jagger, most of the prominent men of that time have proven to be enduring figures outside of their distinct era of relevance. They were hardly the equivalent of some.
No, I know, Mike, but just whenever I see a wall of text from you, I'm like, oh boy, here we go. We're going to get some commie lecture. Gonna get some wall of text about Foucault or something. Actually, no, he was CIA too. Who I really like, the commie I really like. Okie dokie.
Industry plant, again, regardless of how some of them may have gotten there. Now, many conservatives would have already tuned out to what I'm saying here. They often dismiss these things as beneath them, or they accuse the 60s of being some hippie left-wing garbage entirely unworthy of attention. But this dismissal is an extremely stupid approach.
There's some truth in that. But it is stupid in the sense that regardless of how you feel about it, it was impactful and has lasting impact. And it's basically, I mean, that's just, that it's something that guy, would you say is Nima Parvini? He basically, and he made a great point in that book by saying that when you remove a religion, another one will take its place. And that I think is 100% true with the secularism and the essentially worship of the liberal state that, you know, replaced traditionalism or religion in the United States and probably the world in general. Is there was like this just huge vacuum, like, hey man, free love. And then it just, they literally worship it. You know, it's like we were talking about on Zach's show when we were going over Forrest Gump and all that stuff. If you look at the media that they created, especially even post the hippie revolution, they worship that time. They worship that ideology. They worship their own enlightenment. I mean, it literally has taken the place of a religion. It has like a theology. It has certain, you know, dogma, and it has certain heresies too. And it's a very interesting subject of study. Here we go. Yeah, it was absolutely not populist. The CIA literally had teams of agents writing history or leftist critique and then paying academics to stamp their names on it. That was such a ridiculously mind-blowing insight that you offered, because I was like, whoa. Latino, what's up, Paulie? How you doing, buddy? Good to see you, man. Great music, art, and film came out of the 60s. 100%. That is inarguable. You know, the most like the most like dissident right wing guy, like you still fuck with the music. You still fuck with the Rolling Stones, and the movies that followed too were brilliant. Some of the best movies ever. So it's interesting. So I think that's worthy of a lot of contemplation, right? It's like, well, what did we get? We got this ridiculous liberal hegemony that we live in that's so stifling and has like a rigid power structure that has no interest in going anywhere. But we also got, you know, rock and roll. We also got like the cinema revolution of the 70s. So it's like, I don't know, there's like, it's like a double-edged sword. But it needs to change. It can't stay the same way it's going to be. So what is the solution? I don't know. It's an interesting thing. Ascension Dildo. Gramsci developed his Long March Through the Institutions from reading Italian elite theorists while he was in jail. Yeah, that is a good book. I would recommend you guys checking out that book, Ascension Dildo said, The Populist Illusion. It's only like 100 pages. And it doesn't read like academic study. He cites people from academic studies, and the wording is dense and hard to parse through because like it's a lot of very obscure words in a row, and so you have to kind of really focus on like what is he trying to say. But the guy Nima who wrote it does not speak. He does not write like that. He writes in very understandable, digestible prose. It's not really the right word, but that's like his style. Davina, I think the elites and the intelligence agencies realized early on that culture could be jammed into mass mind control. Based, and I believe that's exactly what happened.
And it's the very mindset which ends up giving you this.
I just want to cut my grass, feed my dogs, wear my boots.
But even if you aren't a rock and roll,
If you guys haven't seen that, if you've not been exposed to the Turning Point USA halftime show, that was real. I just want to cut my grass, kiss my feet, drink my beer. Really? Well, you're not very inspiring. You're kind of a pussy. I just want to be left alone. Just leave me alone. Just stop. Stop with all the trans stuff and the BLM things. Just leave me alone. I just want to drink my beer and catch my fish. All right, pussy. Well, I'm not following you anymore. You are correct, Sencha Dildo. It is. It's made me think a lot. It's a very good book. I like it a lot.
fan yourself. It's important that we give the 60s counterculture revolution a Machiavellian review of its function within Western society. Because if we can understand how these figures seized the zeitgeist, then we can learn how to do it ourselves. And while I don't foresee a return of a music scene like that of the 60s, I do believe that if the far right wants to capture the youth, it'll have to be through some type of artistic medium. That medium will then have to function similarly to how the 60s rock scene did. It will have to be a captivating arena filled with exceptionally talented and intriguing people. That will be
Do you guys think that that's possible? What he's suggesting? Do you guys think that that's the type of thing that like could happen? If there was like, you know, I don't know, a bunch of right-wing Zoomers that just created a new culture that sort of replaces the current one or greatly influences. I mean, I don't want to self-aggrandize here, but I really think that that was what the impact of podcasting was. You know, it's not to say that we won, it's over, but what that did, what podcasting did, was change the conversation. It added different perspectives. It added people from education backgrounds that were atypical. It added people like Scott Horton, like people who, you know, read up on foreign policy and really know it and discuss it at length. You know, even like early Rogans, the intellectual dark web, that type of stuff. Like, you know, a lot of that's cringe and whatever, but it started conversations. It really opened up people's perspectives for just different ways of thinking, different ways of processing information, different ways of analyzing government and analyzing culture. You know, I don't think it's insignificant how much online podcasting, YouTube, whatever, affected the way people think and the minds of culture. And it's like, I think that impact is just going to continue to grow because, you know, people under 30 don't get their news from the news. You know, they get it from wherever the hell they get it. Social media, TikTok, podcast. Now, whether you could argue the virtues of that, and that is also able to be controlled. But in a way, I feel like that was the revolution, or at least it was the first step in the revolution, was talking. Now, that's not culturally sexy, and it doesn't last for decades and decades. But I just wonder if can you really have something like that? You know, I think in the 60s, people felt, you know, at least the youth felt like they were all on the same page. But could you say that about today's youth? Could you say that about Gen Z or Gen Alpha? Do you feel like they're all going to collectively believe certain things? I mean, great groups of them will, but is it going to sweep the country? I don't really know. It started conversation so they could corral you back into the Zio plantation. Yeah, but that's not happening. I've never seen more resistance and enlightenment on the JQ ever. It's everywhere you look. You go on Instagram and there's just reels like making fun of that whole concept. Like everyone under 40 is just over Israel and over like and would we have been so enlightened to their outsized power in our country and therefore the world if it wasn't for all these conversations, all this podcasting, all these new forms of information? Would we have just been able to trust that everyone would have read on the subject? No. It was this exact medium that I'm describing is what woke people up. You know, it's what got people out of it. Like I know you're comically cynical, but I think it's actually incredibly powerful. I do. You know what works? Daily doses of mind control through smartphone, screen, and social media. Yeah, that's true. But even that's a untamed platform. You know, you can censor and you can lie, but The truth has a way of bubbling through that. The cracks, exist. And the internet's a big place. And they try to centralize it, but people leave. People go somewhere else. All the angels. I'd say that the idea of a parallel culture is kind of necessary so that we can juxtapose our vision against the current one in a tangible way. How that looks practically, I don't know. Yeah, I wonder if it's a type of thing that you can really plan, because this whole counterculture that existed with podcasting and stuff, like, that wasn't a plan. No one was like, I'm going to fight the liberal world order by talking on a microphone with my friends. Podcasting just started with comedians who wanted to build an audience so they could sell tickets. I mean, that was really like the first wave of impactful and popular podcasts. I'm sure there were political podcasts and stuff like that, but I don't think they moved the needle much. The ones that really the first Marines on the beach really were the comedians. And then from there, the medium expanded in a way that was just far more diverse. I mean, now comedy podcasts are kind of some of the least significant. I mean, if you look at the people who do the numbers, say whatever you want, but it's like Candace Owens, even the Daily Wire still, we like to talk about how irrelevant they are. Go look at their videos. Go look at the Daily Wire videos. Look at the view count. See how irrelevant they are. They're not that irrelevant. Not as irrelevant as you'd like to believe. Fuentes does a million views an episode. This is, I don't know. This is where the conversation's happening. I mean, what happened after the last election, right? After Trump won, and the left, for some reason didn't see it coming. They were like, what was their response? We need our own Joe Rogan. We need a left-wing version of Joe Rogan. That was the response. So I don't know. I think it's an incredibly powerful medium, and I think it does a lot of good to move the needle and have the conversation. What you need is a long march through the institutions. That's Nick Fuentes' plan, right? Is to kind of put a bunch of groypers in all these institutions, whether it's like the Young Republicans Club or, government, like their staffers and interns. Like that's his goal. Like that's his strategy, is to kind of like, from a political point of view, maybe not necessarily from a cultural point of view, but he's mentioned as such on his show. So I don't know. Look at their views and then look at the number of likes and comments. Yeah, I mean, it wouldn't shock me. It would not shock me to know somehow those are boosted. Not at all.
Required if we want to inspire the youth. Ben Shapiro destroying 19-year-olds in college debates never had the fuel to sweep the culture and spiritually fund a movement. And cultural fuel is an important concept to consider here, yet it's hardly even discussed. Some things in the culture don't have the capacity to ever impact the masses, and we need to recognize that. We have to always, first and foremost, be able to determine the actual utility as well as the ceiling of potential of all these cultural weapons we choose to wield. Oftentimes, we cloud our perspective.
Davina, what do you mean the woke right are the sappers to weaken the right? I disagree. The woke right isn't anything, by the way. That's just a term that James Lindsay cooked up to try to hedge out the more nationalistic and identitarian of the right. The people who start to recognize that as a white person, you do have an identity and you do have interests unique to you as a white person, specifically white men. And then you have a nation, and that nation was settled by people like you, and you have an inherited right to that other people just don't. And that was what the idea of the woke right was supposed to be a foil to. I mean, that's why you have someone like Netanyahu calling it the woke Reich, and they think they're fucking clever. That's the whole idea. In fact, I think it's quite the opposite. I think the so-called woke right, which is basically just anyone who's Israel critical, are the real America First people, the real people who can preserve the country, the culture, and will actually give a shit about its people, about its borders, about its currency, about its future, about its next generations. And the other people are just servants of Israel who are grifting with your values. They're using your values to elect a guy like Trump to not do mass deportations and to get a war with Iran off the ground. I actually think it's quite the opposite. No, I agree. There's no such thing as a woke right. That's fucking insane. The needle is moving inside a pre-approved liberal window. If you say so, man. If you say so. I don't know. That's why I was talking with all those Gen Z guys. I don't think they're moving inside any pre-approved anything. But maybe you're right.
And insist that some things are capable of far more than they really are. To analogize this, think about the fastest bicycle in the world. In its most ideal conditions, it might be able to briefly touch the speed of a car if you optimize absolutely everything in its environment. And yet a dumpy Honda from the 90s will almost certainly be able to go faster than any bike with essentially no effort. A bike is limited by its very nature. Its design makes 60+ mile per hour travel basically impossible, and certainly impossible over a long period of time. So we need to stop trying to devotedly make things go beyond their defined parameters. We need to instead find a new mechanism which isn't so restrained. Nearly all of the standard conservative attempts at culture seem to ignore this concept. And the Turning Point USA halftime show was an example of people.
I'd love to agree with you there, Davina, but I don't. I actually think, unfortunately, the Israel conversation is so center to American politics that to deny it, I think, is kind of, you're ignoring the elephant in the room. You're ignoring the 800-pound gorilla, because it's like, wow, how many members of the House took AIPAC money? 85%? That's a big, significant number. You know, and these things, it's like what moves the needle. It's why mass deportations aren't happening. I mean, it's not the only reason. There's business interests and such. But, you know, and the Republicans want to keep their jobs for the midterms. They don't want to piss off the libs too much. You know, it's a limp dick administration. But no, the Israel question is a tremendously important one. I mean, if you read things like the Israel lobby or listen to Scott Horton or any of the libertarians, I mean, it's like it becomes pretty clear that the reason we went to war with Iraq was Israel. Now, if there wasn't a more dramatic occurrence, I don't know what is. I mean, it was it's the war of my lifetime. And it was a few people's lifetimes, because it was the longest war we ever fought. Cost us trillions, changed our culture, changed our status on the world stage. You know, our collective soul was sacrificed. Our innocence was destroyed. I actually think it is central to understanding American politics is the Israel Zionist AIPAC, you know, Jewish oligarchy that really impacts and influences our country. I think it's not a cursory issue. I don't think it's a fringe thing that, you know, only people are focused on. I think it's the center of the conversation, dead center. And I think it's super important. All the angels. Ascension Dildo, don't be nice to him. No, I'm just kidding. You've got a point. Hillary and Obama just recently talking about immigration in a more aggressive way, even highlighting that Obama deported more than Trump. Yeah. Our resident communist has the thought. Our resident Leninist. Which sect are you? Which part of communism is it that I don't understand that you need to explain to me? So what did the commie say? Republicans and Democrats are both liberals whose representatives are ideologically fragmenting and bleeding into one amorphous blob. Well, yeah, that has been the status quo underneath all of our faces for the longest time. But I don't feel that is the case anymore. Obviously, the mass of Americans still reside there. But the next generation, no, it seems to be a very polarized generation. It seems to be extremely far left or extremely far right, kind of a universal rejection of liberalism. That's my reading, and that's my impression of the conversation. Jamma Llama into his Nash. What's going on? Hello. How you doing? All right, let's go finish this video.
people trying to get a bicycle to go as fast as a car. Some people even hoped it might be able to get up to the speed of a rocket. But this perspective is simply divorced from reality. The halftime show was never going to be able to have a sincere impact, and that's sort of okay so long as we aren't deluding ourselves into thinking.
Oh, you're right on your way to becoming a neocon. That's step one in becoming a neocon, Mike, is being a Trotskyite. That's step one. And then step two is you realize the Soviet Union doesn't care about Israel. And then you turn your entire worldview into being pro-Israel and using the American government to fight its wars. Step one. You're almost there, bud. You'll be on the Daily Wire in no time.
Those types of strategies have the capacity to do something entirely outside of their capabilities. It's fine to tactically utilize things in this battle. Not everything.
Wait, you're a Stalinist too? Doesn't that make you a tanky? Fag. Why don't you go on Reddit? Go agree with all the blue hairs.
Needs to be competing for the number one spot. But the way that some conservatives treated the halftime show really exposes the absurdity. Just like Terror on the Prairie doing a big PR tour and then bringing in 13 grand at the box office. The embarrassment comes.
That's what I was talking about in the beginning of this stream, is that it's an embarrassment at the box office, but it's all the social and political baggage that it comes with. That Merlin Daily Wire show could be brilliant. It could be the best thing on TV. I mean, I started watching the first 20 minutes. It isn't. But it could be. But we'll never know because it's got too much cultural baggage. Now, like, that doesn't mean you need to acquiesce to the establishment because the establishment won't even review it. If you go on Rotten Tomatoes, there's literally no industry reviews on it whatsoever. It's just all audience. And like, you fucking queers. But, you know, I kind of get it. It's like when you go to the Daily Wire and you got to see that intro and it's Matt Walsh and Ben Shapiro, you're just like, ugh. Like with those people, it's like, just imagine it was your enemies. Just imagine it was your political enemies when you're starting a show. You'd be like, I don't want to look at AOC when I'm watching the new episode of Mobland. I don't. If I go to Netflix and watch the next episode of One Piece and it's Elon Omar and Hassan, I'm like, I'm not pumped to watch One Piece, you know? Oh, man. Oh, okay. Yeah, see, I don't know enough about your ideology to get that joke. Dropped a speaker. Whoopsie daisy. Oopsie doopsie. Davina, I did find what I read about the Bad Bunny show amusing. You didn't see it? I didn't really care. I don't know. The Stalinist part there is to guard against the Trotsky neocon bug. That's nice and evened out. It's like, we'll be a Trotskyite, but we will have pogroms.
From the hype juxtaposed to the failure. As I said previously, if we define our creations and cultural output by their tactical utility, then it won't have any intrinsic spirit that can truly inspire anybody. And that is why we should all be looking for the spirit of rock and roll to fuel what we do moving forward. That is the fuel which can get us up to light speed. It can win the culture war, just as it entirely transformed, for the worse, the baby boomers. Regardless of whether you like rock and roll, that spirit is the fuel of revolution. It's inherently hard to define, but it was always definitionally anti-establishment, rebellious, edgy, and full of real talent. That's what it's going to take, not protest performances. Billy.
It's an interesting couple points there. I mean, he's right about the protest performances. That is gay. Don't do that. Like, that's just lame because it comes across desperate and weak and just kind of like, you know, the establishment isn't doing things the way we want to do them. We're going to do our own. It's like we're going to do our own halftime show with blackjack and hookers. But no blackjack and hookers, just lame ass country music and a way too old Kid Rock. It's weak. It's a weak energy. And the fact that it's a protest to be like, yeah, we're standing up for it. It's like, it's something I was saying on the last show. It's just like, okay, so if it wasn't Bad Bunny and Kid Rock did the halftime show, what about all the other commercials that sandwiched that performance? What about the commercial where the old white family is mean to the Mexican family, and the Mexican girl has to be the hero to make the white girl and the Mexican girl bond. What about the anti-Semitism commercial? What about all the choose love and end racism branding on the NFL? Would that have changed all of that? Would the culture just switch? It's so meek. It's such a superficial resistance. It means nothing. It adds nothing. It's just fake controversy. It's like fighting over, what plateware to use at dinner while dad is like a complete alcoholic creating a fight with everybody. It's like, yeah, okay, maybe the plateware matters, but not in the broader context, not where dad's a drunk, fighting everyone in the house. The plates actually don't matter then, in that context. It's just like the halftime show. It's like, this is the most cursory detail on this conversation. Who cares? You getting upset about it shows you're weak. You should just mock it. Just make fun of it. That's way stronger position. I don't know enough about my ideology to know if I'm allowed to hate minorities. I don't either, because every time I talk to you, you try to give me like some new concept on how communism actually isn't as evil. And no, it's not even really about government. And it's not about entitlements. It's really about a critical look at history. And, actually people in the USSR were pretty happy. I'm like, what the fuck are you talking about? Where are you getting all this? Stop reading this, the commie propaganda. A cuckage indeed. Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. Yeah, exactly. Oh, shit, they're peacefully protesting. We better change our ways, this state. Yeah, because that wasn't even like... That's the thing they never talk about with the hippie revolution. There was a lot of bombings. There was a lot of left-wing violence that came out of that as well. It wasn't just like, oh, gee whiz, I guess we'll stop being racist now. It was like, our lives are in danger. Let's pass this shit.
Corgan recently had this to say on the power of...
I was actually listening to Curtis Yarvin on PBD on Patrick Pat David yesterday. It was a pretty good interview. I kind of like this Curtis Yarvin guy. I never really listened to him before, but I was like, oh, I like what he's got to say. I don't know if I think like he does, but I thought it was an interesting perspective. But he goes in to talk about how like Martin Luther King, like not only all the stuff that we learned about him that was like leaked, but that he's not even real, that it was like a communist that like put him up, that it was like the American like Communist Party that like picked him because they picked an old issue, which was like racial integration, and that he was just a tool. He didn't write his own speeches, that he's not even real. He's just a guy with a good speaking voice. And you're like, man, nothing I was taught is real about the world.
Rock and roll.
Rock is probably the greatest social change force, and of course I'm including, folk and Bob Dylan in rock in general terms, because it influenced the Byrds and the Beatles and all stuff like that. Right. Rock was the greatest single social changing force of the 20th century. I would dare anybody to argue that. Right. Maybe even more so than film.
Totally, yeah.
Right? Because we've talked a lot about film. And here we are 25 years into the 21st century, and rock couldn't be less of an influence on the social political order. Does anybody think that that's kind of strange?
Right.
That somebody...
I'm sure you're right, such a dildo, about Yarvin. And it wouldn't shock me, because you're just kind of like... It's like when Nick Fuentes was going off about Stephen Miller. Where's your base Jew? Where is he? I thought we were doing mass deportations. Oh, Stephen Miller's just autistically focused on deportation. Where'd he go? So funny, but yeah. But good luck with that. Good luck with trying to get us back on that plantation. Good luck. You're gonna have to up your methods, because it's like just trying to lie us into believing it again is never gonna work. Like, that cat is out of the bag. We are out of the matrix on that issue, man. Good luck. Good luck trying to your Trojan horses. Okay, you could try. You give it your best shot. You spend all that, Mossad money spreading the Hasbara on, but I don't think it's gonna work. When people are making TikTok or Instagram reels making fun of the concept, and they have 80,000 likes on a platform like Instagram, I don't know. But we'll see. I don't know. We'll see. Davina. The problem is we're moving out of living memory of those people. A generation of kids probably don't believe World War II happened. Well, it's one of these things. It's like if you listen to Daryl Cooper's, like he's doing his podcast about World War II from like the German perspective. It's like World War II is such an important, and I don't mean to say myth as it's not a real thing, but myth in the sense of like it's proof of our righteousness and our virtue and the positive impact of American militarism and invading foreign countries. It's just such an important thing for you to believe and worship that it's like I think we should move on from that. I think we should move on from that type of like post World War II liberal consensus of the world. It's like that needs to, first of all, it's built on a lot of not entire truths. And it's just also, we just need to not look at the world that way. It didn't work out, It was pretty bad. A lot of bad things followed. Jamma Lama. The fucking teachers union got busted with some crazy memo about supporting kids' rights to protest, but it was actually coded language to use them as their commie soldiers to stop Trump. Well, yeah, I mean, obvious. Yeah, I mean, what, like suddenly the teachers union and all those institutions became much more like enlightened. Now they're pro new ideas and free speech. I don't think so. Exactly, Sentra Dodo. Precisely.
Decide to push a button somewhere and make sure that people like myself don't say certain things anymore.
And he is correct. The spirit of rock and roll was the most substantive mechanism for change in the 20th century. There is no doubt. And it has been entirely stifled for that exact reason. So whether the fuel that the right wing needs will come through actual rock and roll remains to be seen. But no matter what, the spirit behind it is our ticket to change. We just need to find it now.
What do you guys think of that? What do you think of Mr. Right Wing Coalition's thesis there and his findings? I find it compelling, but I don't. We don't live in the same culture as we did in the 60s and 70s. We just flat out don't. Culture is so much more fractured and fleeting. I was talking about it when I was hanging out with you, Mike, if you remember, before you moved to Seattle. We were watching, was it not Friday the 13th, Nightmare on Elm Street. And I remember just pausing it and looking and just being like, that you can just, when you see a movie from the 80s, you can just tell it's from the 80s. And the same is true about the 70s and 60s. But like kind of post 2000s, not really. The only earmarks are like the different tech that we use, but like the fashion trends and the sort of hairstyles, like they vary and they have their trends, but they're not nearly as socially broad as times have been in the 20th century, And that's actually probably true before the 60s too. I mean, it would be tougher to pick something from like the 1910s versus the 1930s. Like the garb is pretty similar, but culture moved in mass for years, for decades in the 20th century, but it doesn't really move like that anymore. Trends don't last nearly as long. Even slang, right? You look at the whole, what's the name? Clavicular, mogged, frame mogging, and all those terms that they use, and like that's the type of thing that would exist in a pocket, like a cultural pocket and a generational pocket for a while, and then the next generation would get exposed to it and they wouldn't understand it. But now, as soon as those terms become popular, the country becomes aware of it. So even that kind of cultural barrier is sort of gone. But what ends up happening is that people just get in pockets. We're just very fractured, very siloed as culture, right? When it comes to music, comes to movies and entertainment, comes to video games, comes to whatever creator you watch on YouTube, it doesn't really have that sort of sweeping impact on people anymore. So, like, is there going to be an artist that like we all recognize as like, wow, like that? Yeah, you really said it, man. Across an entire generation. Like, what's an artist that even Gen Z as a group would all find inspiring and like really get behind, because it's like if the dudes liked it, the chicks probably wouldn't, and if the chicks like it, the dudes probably wouldn't. And a lot of that comes down from like these political lines. So I don't know. Like I hear what he's saying, but I feel like the time of stuff like that is over. I feel like sweeping cultural events like that are kind of done. You know, we had like the Avengers thing, Game of Thrones. Like, what was the last like significant cultural moment where everyone showed up? You know, they don't really exist like that anymore. Sabrina Carpenter, yeah. Except no, I mean, I think the guys hate Sabrina Carpenter. Mike, Yarvin is an AI chatbot trained on a few fringe political theories and then weaves them together in grammatically correct sentences that don't actually mean anything. I don't know. I don't know that I agree with that. I mean, it's a funny critique, but he seemed he seemed like his theories were pretty well conceived. It kind of seems to align a little bit with the populist delusion, where it's like about elite power theory. I don't know. I find it compelling, but you know. I'm just using it as a reference, Sentient Dildo. It's just, I'm not like, I don't care about Clavicular. He's a fucking idiot. Did you see him on stream with him and with Clavicular, Sneeko, and Fuentes? And you're like, oh my God, this guy is like just above retarded. But like, you know, he's a 20-year-old kid. Like, it's like, I don't really care about what any 20-year-old kid has got to say about anything. But, you know, it was, you know, I was just using it as an example, like their little vernacular that they use. Anyway, all right, folks, that's going to have to do it for me. I got to get going. Unfortunately, I need to wrap it up. Sorry for starting late tonight. I will try not to do that next week, but I was having all these fucking technical issues. But thank you very much for watching this episode of the MFer podcast. If you guys want to do me a favor, if you're on Rumble, press the like button. Apparently, that has a big impact on the Rumble algorithm. Apparently, it doesn't really have as much of an impact on YouTube. What does have an impact on YouTube, apparently, is leaving a comment. So if you want to leave me a nice, lovely comment at the bottom of this stream when we're done, and you could just say how much you appreciated it, I'd appreciate that. Now, knowing you guys, I feel like that was that's a dubious request. I don't know if you guys are going to be also generous or complimentary, but, you know, you go ahead and boost that algorithm for me for a minute. I'm trying to get into the back here of the studio. Maybe I'll send you guys to somebody. Send you folks over to whomever is streaming right now. Who do you want to go talk to? Who do you guys want me to send you to? Anybody streaming? That's a good dude. A real solid G. Colonizers, it has been mad real. It has been absolutely mad real. Let me see here. Am I doing this right? No, I'm not. Stream settings. There we go. I always forget how to do this. It's so fucking stupid the way they bury it. Why is it so difficult? But I appreciate y'all hanging out with me. It was a great time. Mike says they're not Yarvin's theories, but they make it sound like they are. Yeah, I mean, I'm not pretending the guy's a genius. Send you over to Leon. Neon Leon is streaming. Send you over to Leon. He's a great guy. All right, y'all. Thanks again for hanging out with me. I'll see you guys the next